Okay, if you've seen any of my past videos, you know I have a lot of brush pens. As you can see, I now store them in my dream box, but this is new. I have stored them in all different configurations over the past 4 years of running my business, and I've tried all different things. But the question I often get is, how should you store your brush pens? And I'm gonna answer that for you in this video. Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and I'm asked by beginners all the time how to store my brush pens because, let's face it, they're not cheap and you definitely want to make the most out of them. I'm going to jump in and show you how I have mine set up, but right off the bat, I want to say something that might be a little bit surprising. It is really not as big of a deal as people make it out to be. And I'm going to be clear, that's just my personal opinion after having experimented with pen storage for 6+ years. There are some guidelines from the pen companies, which I'm going to fill you in on, but I want to make sure you know that generally speaking, storing a pen the wrong way isn't going to completely ruin it. You don't have to lose sleep over how you're storing your new brush pens. I've only had one pen storage mishap in 6 years, and I really haven't been meticulous about how I store my pens. I kind of just put them in cups or put them in bins however I can at the time. So that should give you a bit of an indication, okay? Don't freak out too much about all of this. And I know you're wondering what the pen storage mishap I had was, and it was that I stored a pack of Tombow Fudenosuke's vertically in a cup, and I had them on a windowsill with the sun beating on them for over a year. So when I went to put them in my workshop kits, they were dried out. But that's sort of like a duh, Becca, you shouldn't leave your pens in the hot sun for a year. With that said though, I'm just gonna show you the pens I have and the ways I have them stored, and then we'll do a little recap at the end. Okay, so we're gonna work kind of from the left to the right of my dream box. And you'll notice that I have things kind of all over the place in different configurations. Some are vertical, some are horizontal. And I tried not to clean this up at all. I mean, it looks organized, but the pens are kind of all over the place, which is kind of proving my point where I was talking about how you don't have to overthink this. So the first thing is these pens up here. These two are actually just like these Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen holders that came with my Tombow Fudenosuke packs, and I use them as cups to hold these paint pens. So these are Derwent paint pens, and again, I'm storing these vertically, but I mean, you could also store them horizontally. I just know that with paint pens, you want to store them either vertically or horizontally. You don't want to store them upside down because the paint will start to leak out of the tips. So as long as they're in either vertical or horizontal, they're okay. Then the next one I have is these Zebra mild liners. These are just highlighter kind of brush pens, and they're totally fine vertical as well. Again, you can definitely store them horizontally, but I just had these cups and these didn't come with my dream box. I just already had things stored like this, so I popped them in my dream box the way they are, and I've never had an issue. Moving on to down here, again, these are jars that I already owned, and I already had these things displayed the way they are. So of course my pointed pens don't matter, but these are Funwari brush pens, and these, again, horizontally or vertically, but vertically seems to work just fine for me. Pencils obviously don't matter. And then I've got my Uniball Signo and my jelly rolls in here, and I never find a problem with them being horizontal either. This is kind of like a whole array of brush pens. I pop these little jars on the table at my workshop so people can play with them. And yeah, again, I've never had an issue with any of them being vertical. And then same thing, just more jars of different kinds of pens down here, and none of them have ever had an issue being vertical. There's Sharpies and there's Tombow Twin Tones, and then some more jelly rolls down here. But basically everything in this whole shelf of my dream box is stored vertically because that's the way that the dream box is built, and I use my little cups. But as we move a little bit farther down the line, I've got things stored horizontally. So I chose what goes in here based on some things that I wanted to keep a little more horizontal. Honestly, I'll just tell you, these are much more expensive items, so I really try to take care of these as perfectly as I can. These are my Posca paint pens, and they can be stored vertically, but they recommend horizontal, so I leave these horizontal in here. These are more paint pens, Posca paint pens, just a different size. And then I have my Molotow paint pens. These are very expensive, so I follow the instructions on those pretty closely and keep them horizontal. This is Sharpie paint pens. These are Artistro paint pens. These are chalk paint pens, and so are these. So all different kinds of paint pens, chalk pens, and all of that kind of stuff in here. And I try and keep them horizontal just to take care of the ink. But the fact that all of these are paint pens, they all have that little ball in them where you can shake it up and you can kind of reinvigorate the paint if they've been sitting for a while. So they can be vertical. I just try and keep them horizontal if I can. Then moving on here, this is all Tombow pens that I use for my workshops. Tombow pens specifically say that you can store them however you want. They're pressurized in the barrel, so it won't be problematic if they're horizontal or vertical, and Tombow sells different cases for them to be vertical, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is a bunch of twin tone pens, oops, and then a bunch of dual brush pens. And so it's fine that they're horizontal. Honestly, they're only horizontal because they fit really well in these drawers, but otherwise I wouldn't be trying to keep them horizontal. The rest of these drawers as we move down are just filled with a mishmash of different pens. Again, they're all stored horizontally, so I'm not worried about them. These are just kind of things that didn't really fit anywhere else, and that all of those drawers moving down have stuff like that. So lots of Crayola pens and different random things in here. All right, next up is this row of more little trays of pens, and again, this is similar to here where they're horizontal just by design of the dream box. So these are my Artline Sticks brush pens. Those could be vertical or horizontal. Same with these Tombow colored Fudenosuke pens. Again, Tombow says you can store them however if you want vertical or horizontal. Then the zebra highlighters, same thing, could be either way. These are paint pens. These are the Archer and Olive acrylograph paint pens, and again, with paint pens, I try and keep them horizontal if I can. Pencils, obviously, no big deal. But when we get to the Micron pens, these are the only pens in my whole dream box that I actually am very mindful of how they're stored. So Micron pens actually do suggest, because they're pigment ink, that they're stored horizontally and not vertically. Otherwise, the ink will actually settle in the bottom of the pen and it'll dry out the tip and they don't work very well. So Micron pens, and because they're quite expensive, I try and pay a lot of attention of how I store them and keep them horizontal. All right, next up is this section on my Tombow dual brush pens. These are the little cubbies that came with my dream box specifically for displaying pens, and I recognize that this is a problematic amount of Tombow brush pens that I own, but I'll tell you, these are for workshops. I don't actually use these. I put these in my workshop kits, so don't judge me too hard. But again, Tombow specifically says you can store them horizontally or vertically, so these are totally fine stored the way they are. And then next, some more Tombow dual brushes. Shocker, even though I just said that what I had before was enough. So to prove my point, this is actually a Tombow branded holder, and these are for holding them vertically. So again, they can be stored horizontally or vertically, and so I just keep these ones on display for use in my office, and these are the ones that I grab from when I'm working. And then some more Tombow pens. This is another kit that they sell, which I take to workshops with me. So what's really handy about this kit is that it comes apart in 3 pieces, and you can spread it out like a long thing. So I put it along a table at a workshop, for example. So I've got a mix of dual brushes on the top, and then I have twin tones here, and I've got some highlighters and a random pencil sitting here for no reason. But just to give you an idea, like I've got this big part of horizontally stored ones, and then I have 2 different displays for vertical. So Tombow brush pens are totally fine either way. All right, this is the last little section of brush pens I have. So these are just a mix of different metallic pens. I have some Caron metallic pens. I have some Sta, or S-T-A, whatever you call them, brush pens. And then there's some Zebra in there as well. Again, horizontal just by nature of the design of my dream box, but I would store them either way. These are more Tombow dual brush pens. This is some Kelly Creates pens from Michaels. They're okay to be stored horizontal or vertical. And then these ones are actually like the Pentel Aquash brush pen, which has paint actually in here. And these are Jane Davenport from Michaels, and again, they have paint in them, and then they come out of like a really juicy paintbrush tip. So the only thing I wouldn't do with these is store them upside down or they're gonna leak. So I keep them horizontal, but you also could keep them vertical if you wanted. Okay, this is a bin with even more Karen markers, storing them horizontally. Same with this. These are just some old rendering markers I had in university. They would be fine either way. And then this is my big bin of Tombow Furunosuke's. I have so many of these, and these are the pens that I had the only mishap with, which was putting them vertical in a holder and then against a window for too long. But stored horizontally or vertically, they should be totally fine as long as you're not keeping them for many, many, many years in a really hot spot. So no big deal with these. All right, so let's take all those examples I just showed you and then boil it down to some advice you can actually take away and apply to your own stuff. So number one, when in doubt, store your pens horizontally. The majority of pens are totally fine or even recommended by the pen companies to store that way. So horizontally when in doubt. Number two, if you want to store your pens vertically, but you aren't entirely sure, most pen companies have instructions on their website. So just a quick Google of that type of pen is gonna help you, but usually it's totally fine. Number three, if it's full of paint or if it's really flowy ink, don't store it upside down. Number four, try to keep them away from the sun. You heard about my mishap, it's a real thing. And number five, don't get yourself all worked up about this. Store them however you want to store them, however it makes sense in your studio, and then reassess if need be later. So I really hope that helps. Hit like on this video if it did, and if you have any specific questions about storing certain pens, leave them down below and I'll try and help you out. Next up, I'm going to link you to a video on how to actually use your pens properly, and I'll see you over there.